Knowing how to properly control the government eliminates a lot of corruption. How to control the government by design. This page changed with the April 30, 2025 edit. Controlling the government. The owners of a new corporation generally know how to control it because their contracts are fresh in mind. When that corporation passes through many generations, that how to control question might come up as the lines blur. To keep tyrants from taking control, the co-owners should be completely knowledgeable about the content of the corporate founding charter or government. In these United States of America, that corporate charter is the unanimous Declaration of the United States of America. The Declaration refers to the entire body of citizens when it uses the words, the governed. Citizen control over government, specifically relating to what powers the governed people may grant to their government, is strictly limited to the terms of the unanimous Declaration of the United States of America. The governed people are prohibited from granting to or allowing the government officers to exercise any of the tyrannical political powers listed. Beyond that, we focus on what powers the governed people may of right grant to government and how to go about granting those powers. The consent of the governed vote count method. The consent of the governed comes from the Declaration. It refers to how government gets its just or honorable powers. But what does it mean to get the consent of the governed, or the consent from a known number of people? Every citizen has the right to participate in voting, or to not participate. To know the difference, there is a registration of those who are eligible and want to participate. This creates the voter registration, which contains a known number of people who are registered voters. With the consent of the governed clause, a registered voter can either consent to or withhold consent from any balloted item or candidate, or from all of them. The only requirement for the voter is that if a voter wants some person or item on the ballot to win, they must submit a consenting ballot indicating their choice. The requirement for candidates or parties passing an agenda on the ballot, they must be able to convince enough registered voters to consent or fail for lack of consent. But how many registered voters must consent in order to declare a win? For this, we need to know what the word consent and to consent meant to the generation who authorized the respective representatives to sign the unanimous Declaration of the United States of America. Old dictionary time. You may view screenshot images from a digitized version of the 1756 Samuel Johnson dictionary set at Glossary of Old Words. Consent. 1. The act of yielding or consenting. 2. Concord. Agreement, accord. 4. Tendency to one point. To consent. 1. To be of the same mind. To agree. 2. To cooperate to the same end. With this, we also define yield and abstain because the word yield appears in the consent definition. Abstain is also defined so as to compare it with yield. To yield, VA 7. To resign, to give up, VN 1. To give up the conquest, to submit. To abstain, to forbear, to deny oneself any gratification. The yield definition covers those who choose not to participate in voting right from the start. By not registering as a voter, they yield to the will of the vote count of the majority of the total number of registered voters. When a registered voter decides to not participate, they abstain by denying themselves any gratification from consenting or withholding their consent. To abstain, they must physically have their name removed from the voter registration. Yielding and abstaining are not the same as consenting. The consent of the governed deals with a known number of voters, registered voters. For clarity, these people are registered as voters, which means that every time a ballot goes out in their political jurisdiction, their vote must be properly accounted for as either consenting or as not consenting. The consent of the governed clause makes it the duty of the registered voter to get their consenting vote to the polling station before it closes. Otherwise, the voter has not yet consented to anyone or anything on the ballot. This system created a default non-consent voter position, eliminating most of the corruption that finds its way into voting. It requires who or whatever is on the ballot to educate the registered voters. They must be good enough in order to encourage more than 50% of the total body of registered voters to go to the polling station to grant their consent, or fail for lack of consent. This is an unusual concept. It is not taught, other than in these pages. Fortunately, it still has a chance, as most of the people, presented with the full picture of the consent of the governed benefits for citizens, they would like to see it practiced. The powers that may be granted. For this, we simply repeat a clause from the Declaration's second paragraph, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Every government power, one exercised, must work to equally protect everyone's rights. This is a lot simpler than it sounds. When we realize that every person possesses the exact same list of rights, with each individual likely selecting different rights, while also placing different values on the same rights chosen, there is no conflict between two people exercising what appears to be conflicting rights. Consent to the governed vote count benefits. It makes it more difficult to get into government office and to grant powers to government, but not impossible. This form of majority vote counting reduces the impact of special interest, PACs, and lobbyist activity that buys the politician's vote away from the constituents. This form of majority also demands that even more registered voters be well informed on the matter and convinced that it is a good enough idea to warrant their time to get a consenting vote to the polling station. Enforcing the consent of the governed clause alone will keep well over 90% of all of the people presently in our elected offices out of office for lack of consent. This also will remove the majority of all people in appointed offices, because those who appointed or confirmed them into office should not have been there to do so, thus forcing their replacements. With the consent of the governed, it assumes that every citizen eligible to vote and desires to participate has registered as a voter. In this way, it protects the right of individuals to not participate in voting. Forced action produces inferior results. Forced does not have to be physical force or threat of law. Force can be emotional or psychological in the form of guilt trips. You did not submit a ballot? You're lazy, apathetic, or worse yet, unpatriotic. It requires the people of all political divides, such as party, religion, money, sex, age, race, etc., to work together to find a candidate common enough and trusted enough by the majority of the total number of registered voters to attain their consent. This forms a unity among the people. Corrupt governments fear most. It saves lots of vote counting time. If less than 50% of the total number of registered voters check in at the polling station, the entire ballot automatically fails for lack of consent. It protects the right of those who choose to not participate in the voting by not criminalizing or demonizing them if they do not register as a voter. People who do not want to consent to anything or anyone on the ballot need not even submit a ballot, saving them time at the polling station. People who want to consent to something or someone on the ballot need not stand in line behind non-consenting voters, which saves them time at the polls as well. This demonstrates to all that the people truly control our government. For the first time in our nation's history, it automatically eliminates most of the corruption in government because those sworn into office will have earned the trust of the majority of voters. The candidates now know that the majority of voters can remove them from office before the end of their term. It eliminates the mob rule in special interest voting, which at present allows super small voting populations to run, ruin, and control government and the nation. Counting votes in this manner encourages more people registered as voters to submit a ballot if they want some item or some candidate to pass. They will know that if they do not submit a ballot to the polls, their vote automatically counts against everything and everyone on the ballot because they did not consent to any of it. The voter registration is 100% purged frequently every year right after each election, removing all of the following: those who died, those who moved out of the district, those incarcerated after being duly convicted, those who lost interest, others not qualified to vote. It eliminates the false need to vote for the lesser of evils, to feel patriotic. Civics video, the vote count. This 5-minute vote count video demonstrates the Declaration's design to account for every registered voter's vote. Up next, how reading and math stop political corruption. Governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed, 1776. The governed, by design, are intended to work together as a unified body, controlling the government's powers, equally protecting each other's rights. Share to help get and keep clean, honest government. End page content.